Gerry has appeared on BBC, CNN, CNBC television, and partaken in various radio shows and featured in numerous print media publications. If you do have any questions, though, we might be able to pass them on to Gerry, so please do put them in the app just in case, and we'll try and also organise for a session in the future so that you can ask him live as well. Thank you.
This is Mount Everest. It's estimated that it's about 150 billion tons of mass material, of rock. In 1970, it's estimated that we were digging out of the earth about 25 to 30 billion tons of material every year. So that was in 1970. By 2020, it was estimated that we were digging out of the earth about 100 billion tons of material on a yearly basis. And by 2050, it's estimated that we'll be digging out of the earth about 170 billion tons of material. So by 2050 or before it, we will be extracting from the planet one Mount Everest every single year. We are having an incredible material impact on our planet, and it has grown massively since the 1970s, our impact, our mining and our extraction from the planet. It's not sustainable. Under no world, under no set of conditions is this sort of extraction and impact sustainable. 90% of this is waste. It's not even used for useful products. It's tailing or slags or rocks or stone or effluent or, poisoned water. We don't even use it. And most of what we do use, within 2 or 3 years, it ends up as waste as well. In all the CO2 impact that humans have had on basically our planet since we arrived as modern humans some 300,000 years ago. Up until 1975, we had caused about 25% of that CO2. So of all the total CO2 that we humans have been responsible for, about 25% of it up until 1975. Between 1975 and 1995, another 25%. So we did as much damage in 20 years from 1975 to 1995 as we had done in the previous 300,000 years. But we were only getting started in the 70s. Between 1995 and 2020, we caused the other 50%. So in 50 years, we have caused 75% of the CO2 damage that humans are attributable for. That is what they call exponential growth in humans' ability to damage the planet. And it is not because of population growth. And it is not because of poor people. The rich 10% are causing 50 to 60% of the CO2 damage. It is our rich lifestyles, our multiple devices, our huge big vehicles, and all the other technological gadgetry that goes with our modern lifestyles. Humans have had a devastating impact on the planet and on the living species on the planet. Hunted animal masses 10,500 years ago were only 1.7% of those that were around 1.5 million years ago. Of all the weight of mammals currently on the planet, humans represent something like 30%. Livestock to feed humans represents another 67%. And basically wild animals represent 3%. And one of the core reasons that there's a massive decline in wildlife is the mining and the extraction that we are impacting on our planet. Marine life species decline since 1970, 49%. Insects, 50%. Irish birds, 63%. Wildlife in general, 66%. Freshwater species, 83% decline. We are having an incredible impact in multiple different ways because of our modern technological lifestyle. The UK Committee on Climate Change estimated that to achieve net zero, and even achieving net zero is problematic, whether that will even come close to solving the problem, but that technologies will deliver about 38% of the ability to achieve net zero. That some behavior change is 53%, and major behavior change is 9%. So it's our behavior. And what sort of behaviors? How do we need to change behaviors? And I think here the idea, of librarians and looking after information and being careful and storing and organizing and classifying and, getting rid of the old stuff and maintaining and nurturing. These are key skills. And the key skills of moving away from technology, not getting rid of technology, but moving away. We need less technology. We need more walking and less electric vehicles. We need walkable, cyclable cities, getting out of our cars, getting away from our actual devices. These are the behavior changes that we actually need. Coming back to the material impacts. To make one smartphone, just one smartphone, there's about 60 materials, at least 60 minerals and distinct materials, and upwards of 1,000 substances in a smartphone. And making a smartphone causes about 60 kg of CO2. So 80% of the CO2 impact that a typical smartphone will have throughout its lifetime occurs during the manufacturing process, because it's an incredibly intensive, energy intensive, and wherever there's lots of energy, there's lots of pollution. So a typical smartphone is about 160 grams, 160 grams in weight, and about 80 grams of that weight is minerals, the mineral materials. To get those minerals requires 90 kg of stones, gravel, tailings and slag to be dug up and dumped in the process. So to get the minerals for a smartphone requires digging up 1,100 times its weight in minerals that goes into that smartphone. Since 2007, we've made about 15 billion smartphones. About 15 billion smartphones, an extraordinary amount. That's 900 million tons of CO2, 1.3 billion tons of material, and 204 billion tons of water. Water, which is an incredibly scarce resource. This is a 1,900 litre container of water container. How many of these to make one smartphone? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 13,600 litres of water to make just one smartphone. Chips are extraordinarily tense in their demand for water, computer chips. To make a laptop, 300 kgs of CO2. 300 kgs of CO2, 1,200 kgs of stone, gravel, tailings and slag. An incredible impact on the environment. This is what a 1,200 kg stone looks like. It's a lot of material to get that small little laptop. A lot of the electrical efficiency, because the data centers and the smartphones and the laptops are saying, oh, but we're very, energy efficient. we last a long time. The amount of wattage is not as great as it was, 20 years ago by any means, and the data centers, electrical efficiency. But a lot of that electrical efficiency is achieved by intense material intensity. So, we create this Pyrrhic victory in technology of energy, claimed energy efficiency, electrical usage, length of battery, etc., by being more and more intense in the manufacturing. The manufacturing process of modern chips is 10, 20, 30 times more energy intense than the older chips. And what's the gain? These small incremental gains. So look to the materials if you want to understand digital and you want to understand its impact. The other huge problem with digital is that everything that is designed with digital shortens its lifespan. So there's nothing that lasts in digital. And when you think of the energy intensity, and the amount of waste, the amount of materials used to make the things, and then that it has such a short, miserable life, then you have a perfect storm of waste and damage to the earth and its climate and all the living systems. The total to make a toaster, about 16% of basic, CO2 occurs during the manufacture. To make a vacuum cleaner, 32%. To make a desktop computer, 53%. Clothing, textile, 73%. To make a laptop, 77%. And a mobile, 79%. So most of the intensity is occurring during the manufacturing. And then we've got an incredibly short life cycle. So if any lesson you're taking out of this talk and presentation, it's that we need to hold on to our digital devices as long as possible. And if you're purchasing or have any role or responsibility for the purchasing of devices, you need to buy things that will last and get them repaired if they break. And go to companies and ask them and say, what's the warranty? How repairable is this actual digital device? The life of a machine. It's estimated that a vacuum cleaner should live for about 11 years. 11 years, and that today they're living about 6.5 years. So 4.5 years less than they should to get some sort of a reasonable return on the material use. A washing machine in 2011 was the estimate 17 years, but we were getting an average of 10 years out of a washing machine. But a washing machine in 2021 is 6.3 years. Why the decline? Because of modern electronics. Everything that digital touches turns to dust. It becomes fragile. It becomes brittle. There is nothing long-lasting about digital. Digital has tremendous material intensity, tremendous energy intensity, and it creates things that are brittle and fragile. A laptop should last 20 years. We are getting 4.5 years if we are lucky out of most laptops. Every year we create a great wall of China of electronic waste, of e-waste, over 50 million tons, enough to build a Great Wall of China. And in another 15 years, we'll be able to build 2 Great Walls of China, 100 million tons. In the larger scale, I think you think, oh, that's not a huge amount of waste. No, by volume, it's not that an incredible amount of waste. It's about 2, 3, 4, 5% of landfill, of dumps. But it is 70 to 80% of toxicity in those landfills. It may be relatively speaking small in volume, but its toxicity, its poisoning of the air and the water and the atmosphere is enormous. E-waste is the most fastest growing, most dangerous waste stream in the planet. So we want to minimize this waste stream and slow it down, whereas it's absolutely racing ahead because we are constantly, in a phony way, upgrading our systems for very little benefit other than keeping IT departments busy. The vast majority of e-waste is not recycled. Less than 20% is professionally recycled. A great deal of it is illegally exported to poor countries like Ghana or Pakistan or Nigeria or India, where this is how it's recycled. They put the basic cables in open pits and burn them. And their PVC is very, very toxic and extraordinarily dangerous when you burn it. Chemicals that can destroy and toxins that can destroy your lungs and cause cancer, and all sorts of and seep into the waterways. And there are multiple, when you burn these materials, it's not just the cables, but there's mercury, there's lead. Basically, digital devices are incredibly toxic if they are not properly disposed of. And we have got WHO estimated 18 million children and 13 million women around the world are working directly in these e-waste sites, inhaling these toxins and living and eating the fish and the eggs that are with mercury and lead and all sorts of other toxins close to these campsites. But it's not just close, they spread far and wide because many of these are forever chemicals and forever materials, and they dissipate and become micro, just like the microplastics become micro, and they spread through the air and they spread through the water, the global water systems. And this is going to build up to be a bigger and bigger and bigger problem. What is driving a lot of this, what is driving these devices, is often the data. And this is where we can specifically do something as information professionals. If we cannot radically slow down the growth and usage of digital devices, we can certainly do something to educate the population, to educate young people, to educate schools, to educate parents about the date in growth, because it is often data that's driving the purchase of the new devices or the need for more data or faster downloads, etc. In 2010, we had produced as a human species about 2 zettabytes of data. Now, to understand a zettabyte of data, I estimated that we would need to cut down 20 trillion trees to get enough wood, enough paper to print out 1 zettabyte of data. So we need to cut down 20 trillion trees. 20 trillion trees. There are only 3.5 trillion trees left on the planet. So that wouldn't be possible. And that's just 1 zettabyte of data. By 2020, we're about 50 zettabytes of data. By 2025, it's estimated about 175. By 2030, 612. By 2035, over 2,000 zettabytes of data. These are unimaginable quantities. These are unimaginable numbers. 28% annual growth rate. 90% of this data is crap. 90% of it is not used, is not useful. How do we develop programs that get a respect for data instead of constantly wasting data? And it is this waste growth in data that is driving the data centers and driving the purchase of so many new devices. One study found across a whole range of organizations that 14% of data was actually useful, 32% was useless, and 54% was unknown. 54% of data, they didn't even know what it was about in all these organizations. Another study found that only 5% of data will be reused 90 days after it's created. Only 5% of data will be reused. And I've seen other studies which showed that only 5% of data is actively managed. So there's 95% of data out there in all sorts of shapes and forms that has no use. And we have a culture just of collecting everything and storing everything. And if we change that culture, we could reduce data centers in Ireland are now consuming 14% of our annual electricity. They're consuming more electricity than all of rural households. Consuming more electricity than all of rural households. So here's some specific tips, and I'm going to go into more, but you can take these. I'll be sending on these presentations, turn them, use them in whatever way that you want. So in relation to a smartphone, hold on to it, fix it, repair, fix and repair. You know, don't hoard, sell, donate, give away. You know, don't, because these have such short life cycles, it's really important you get them out into the marketplace or give them away. Do not keep them within your desks. Buy refurbished, remanufactured. Refurbished and remanufactured are just as good as new. Buy designed to last. There's phones called the Fairphone, which are modular and repairable and designed to last. So in relation to the use, minimize notifications, disable location services. You know, look for ways to reduce energy. Reduce energy, you increase the lifespan of the battery. The battery is the key component that goes first. Delete old content, old apps. You know, get rid of those old photos. Think hard before downloading apps. Watch out for greedy apps. Keep your battery level between 50 and 80%. Short charges tend to be better. Don't leave it plugged in at full charge because it's constantly going up to 100% and then going down a little and then going back up again. Don't drain your battery completely. Not good for your battery. Use a quality wire to charge. Never charge with wireless. Wireless is about 50% more energy intense. Plug out the charger. Dim the screen. Use dark mode. Stream in standard definitions. Don't expose your phone to a lot of heat. Devices and phones and batteries, they don't like a lot of heat, but the core lesson, hold on to it. Keep it for as long as you can. And don't worry if you couldn't take notes. If you want to take notes on this, you're going to get this. I'm going to make this publicly available to you. You can reuse it in any way you want. So in relation to the laptop, same ideas. Hold on to it, fix it, repair it. Don't hoard, sell, donate, give away, buy refurbished, buy designed to last. Get the lowest spec. We usually buy laptops and devices that are much more performant, have much more power than we actually need. Best energy ratings, always look, and wattage is a key thing to look for in that. Avoid large screens. A large screen can be as intense as the entire laptop. Avoid heat, focus on airflow. Reduce monitor brightness where possible. The brightness is very energy intensive. Do not use screensavers. Monitor off after 5 minutes max. Sleep after 10 minutes max. Delete all content. You know, every time you go into a folder looking for something, look for something to delete. Update apps. Close apps, tabs when not using. Shut down the Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. Shut down when you're not using. At night, maybe, the library, if it closes at 9 o'clock, why keep the router going all night long if it's not being used? Shut down the stuff that is not being used. It's estimated that up to 20% of electricity is wasted by what is called vampire power, devices that are always on but not being used. Hold on to the key lesson again. So I talked about Framework Computer, and I do believe Framework is available in Australia. And look out for more for refurbished, for entities that sell refurbished and remanufactured. They're just as good as the new. In fact, they're often better because they go through more intensive testing. Dell is looking to do good things in the area of modular design. It's developed the concept Luna, which is 50% reduction in CO2 in the manufacturing process. So turn off the desktop. When your computer, this was a study of desktop, but it applies across all sorts of devices. It found that a desktop computer that was on but not being used was still utilizing 50% of the wattage. A typical wattage is about 200 wattage for a desktop. So it was just on, nobody using it, it was using up 100 watts. At 50% utilization, 180 watts, and just moving from 50% to 100%, 200, So turn stuff off. If it's not being used, turn stuff off. If one person doing this doesn't make much of a difference, but if millions of us would learn to do this, if we turn this into a movement, and I'm not saying here it's us as individuals that are to blame for this. It is the manufacturers who are to blame in their designs, etc. But we need to do something, and we need to become a force that starts demanding from the manufacturers more environmentally friendly designs. Why shut down your computer? Reduces systems issues, longer life, reduces energy. It's like a good, a thorough sleep. It helps the computer, in essence, repair itself in some ways. So shut down your computer. Brightness, key thing from an energy point of view. Reducing your computer's monitor's brightness from 100% to 70% can save up to 20% of monitor's energy consumption. So we need to rebuild that culture where we conserve rather than waste, because digital drives such an incredible culture of waste. 5 apps that really drain your battery. So Facebook, Google apps. So certain apps are much more intensive than others because they're constantly calling back to the servers. So there's apps that are much harder on the environment than others. Remanufactured laptops. 40% savings over new, 300 kg, well, that's the total, at least 280 kg saved, because they don't have to, mine the materials again. 1,200 kg in natural resources, 190,000 litres of water. So a smartphone is about 13,000 litres of water. A laptop can be in the region of 190,000 litres of water, and they're just as reliable. So I said, I bought one of these years ago. I thought it was really cool. Wi-Fi or remote charging. No, 50% more energy intense. Wi-Fi tends to be more energy intense than wired. So if you're doing a lot of work, use wired. If you're transferring a lot of data, use wired. It's nearly always much more energy efficient than transferring by Wi-Fi, or certainly the 3G, 4G, 5G. Web page size, if you have any control over your websites and your web design, web page size have been getting ridiculously big, and they don't need to get this big. It's most of it is actually waste. So in 2005, an average of 0.4 of a megabyte, by 2010, 0.7, by 2015, 2 megabytes, by 2020, about 4 megabytes in actual weight, the average web page. Web page weight is a tax on the poor. And what it means is people with older devices, they're going to be much, much slower. So if we design slim and good, it'll allow older devices to live longer as well. The heavier the digital artifacts, the more intense they are, and the more they require new devices. And here, these websites, COP, saving the world, but their website was among the dirtiest on the actual internet, 94% dirtier than all the websites out there, something like 9 megabyte in size. So the COP, claiming that it's green, claiming that it's saving the world, but its website was like a dirty 20-year-old filthy diesel truck. because people don't care about digital. People don't think it matters. People have this idea that it's ethereal. People think that it's cloudy. It's in the cloud. It has no real impact. Wonderful propaganda work that the digital and tech industry has actually done. Smartphone, the weights in sizes. Smartphone owners with lower incomes in the US were especially likely to use mobile devices in seeking jobs and looking for important information. And yet many of these environments exclude them because they're too heavy, they're too intense, they're using JavaScript or other sort of systems. So web page weight is a tax on the poor. Images. This is estimated to be one of the very first images ever taken. A view from the window at La Grasse in Paris, I think, 1826 or 1827. So by 1900, from 1827 to 1900, it's estimated there were about 1 million photographs taken. About 1 million photographs taken. And then from there on, not huge growth in the process. Until the 90s, it began to take off in the 90s, and then in 2000, and look at it, from 2010 to 2020, look at the absolutely explosion. So now, from 1 million to 13 trillion, from 13 trillion photos. There was 1.4 trillion photos taken in 2020. So there was more photos taken in 2020 than in the entire 20th century. And the vast majority of them are crap. And now it's estimated that there's something like 8, 9, 10 trillion stored in the cloud. So, and it's not just the quantity of photos, but the resolution of photos has grown enormously. 1x, about 1 to 2 megabyte in weight. But when we get up to 4x and 8x, and the same image at 8x resolution versus 1x resolution, 64 times more, 64 megabyte. And if we're looking at these on a smartphone or a desktop, we can't see the difference. You can only see the difference if you blow it up on a massive, cinema screen in the process. So a lot of this is just waste. It's unnecessary. We don't need to do it, but it's cool. We got an 8x phone. We're killing the planet for no benefit, for just a superficial want. Photos stored in the cloud, 2020, 7.9 billion. 2021, 8.9 billion. 2022, almost trillion, not billion, trillion, almost 10 trillion by 2022. So how can we encourage people to have campaigns to delete all those old photos and show them how to do it in different areas and spaces? And I'll be giving some tips near the end. 1,000 words of text. Text is the most energy efficient way of communication. So if we can use text for communication, if we want to be environmentally friendly, if we want to be truly green. So I saved 1,000 words of text as a text file, and it came out as 6 kilobyte. I saved it as HTML optimized, so well-written HTML, what we build web pages from, 7 kilobytes. HTML is the next most efficient green way of communication. I saved it as a Word document. It was about 16 kilobytes. As unoptimized, so badly optimized, so basically just saved in a sloppy way, in sloppy HTML, it was 51, and PDFs over 60. PDFs are quite intense. They're energy inefficient. PDFs are horrible for multiple reasons. So if you can avoid PDFs, avoid PDFs. The most energy efficient, the most environmentally way to communicate is a text file. The next best way is a well-written HTML optimized page. Let's go to images. They say an image paints 1,000 words. Well, an image is 1,000 times more energy intense than 1,000 words, or certainly multiple times more. 150 dpi. So I estimate 1,000 words is about 2 A4 pages of text. So I created 2 images, that each one taking up an A4 page of text, and that came up at 178 kilobytes for a web BP, which is the most optimal way to save an image on the web. But a JPEG, 404. A 300 dpi WebP, 392, so that's a higher resolution. A 300 dpi JPEG, about almost a megabyte. So 212 times more intense, potentially, an image than the equivalent 1,000 words in text. Let's go to audio. To read 1,000 word of text takes about 4 minutes. 4 minutes. So an MP3, we're now into megabyte. 4 minutes of audio is about 4 megabytes. MP3 256 kbps, about 8 megabytes. A WAV, 66 megabytes. 66 megabytes. So don't use WAVs in the process unless you're doing studio work for a musical enterprise. But potentially 11,000 times more CO2 than text. But let's go to video. Let's go to video. 4 minutes of video at quite low resolution, 24 frames per second, 55 megabytes. Typical YouTube, about 70. YouTube high definition, 110. We go to 4K, unbelievable when we get into 4K and 8K. And for no reason other than superficial ones, we don't even see the differences. But the earth feels the differences in these environments. So 400,000 times more CO2 than text. Some tips in relation to online meetings. Online meetings, waste reduction. And of course, you're probably saying, well, he's prepared this or sent it as a basic video. Is sending a basic video less energy intense than getting on a flight and going to Australia? Absolutely. Yeah, yes, it is. There's no question about that. There are reasons. I'm not saying never use video, but if we're creating billions and trillions of images, 1.4 trillion images, when we get up into those massive scales, and we're still flying as much as we ever flew. It's not that we've stopped flying, it's that we're flying more than we've ever flown, and we're using, online video, and we're using all these other things as well. So they're adding on top of all these other wasteful activities. So running an online meeting, how can we reduce waste in it? Video to greet, then go to audio, because audio is 90% less polluting than video. So use video for the first 5 minutes, then go to audio. And you'll save up to 90% on pollution. Keep them as short as possible, lowest res as possible. Use the smallest screen if you can watch it. If you can do it on a smartphone, it's much less energy intense than if you do it on a desktop or a laptop. Avoid virtual backgrounds. Virtual backgrounds may look cool, but they're very, very energy intense. They are very, very energy intense. So please avoid virtual backgrounds. The platform, you may not have much choice in this, but Zoom is more energy efficient than Teams is, estimated about 2 to 3 than Microsoft Teams. Don't save the meeting unless you have to. And if you do save it, get rid of it after 3 or 4 months. Delete saved videos after 3 or 4 months. And text or phone or physically go over and meet the people if they're in the same building. So let's have a little bit of a look at emails. Emails, they say it takes about 29 grams of CO2 on average to send a letter and for all the paper involved. So the total impact of a physical letter is about 29 grams of CO2. An email about 4 grams. Lots of debates, how do you measure it, etc. But somewhere in that territory, I believe. So you say, obviously it's better to send an email than to send a letter. Spam is about 2.3 grams because most spam doesn't get too far in the network. But send an email with a big attachment can be up to 50 grams. in some situations. Attachments, horrible things. Don't send attachments. So letters, emails, spams, let's dig a little deeper. A HTML email is actually a bit more intense in its structuring than a text email. So we're at 6 to 2 grams, and spam again, attachment 50. So you say, oh yeah, well, it's good. That's not so bad for digital. Well, 405 billion letters are posted every year. Physical letters. 405 billion physical letters posted every year. 390 billion emails sent every day. 390 billion sent every single day. And 84% of these emails are spam. 84% of these emails are spam. So the millions of tons of CO2 caused by all of these various environments, these methods of communications. Physical letters, about 12 million tons of CO2. Emails with images, about 46 million tons of CO2. HTML emails, 34 million. Text-based emails, 11 million tons. Emails with attachments, 270 million tons. And spam, 36 million tons. So spam alone creates 3 times more CO2 than all the physical letters sent, this on a yearly basis. It's because when we get into digital, we do far, far more than we do in physical. And there's often a link between attachments and poor intranets and poor information architecture, because people are sending the link because they're afraid you're not, or the attachment because they're afraid you're not going to be able to find it. So I calculated how many trees would we need to plant to deal with the CO2. A typical tree can sequester about 10 kgs of CO2. So a letter, we'd need to, for all the letters on a yearly basis, about 1.2 billion. For those emails with images, about 4.6 billion. With HTML, 3.4 billion. Text, 1.1 billion. Attachments, 27 billion. Spam, 3.6 billion. The amount of trees we'd have to plant. And of course you see here, so what can we learn? Default to text if you can control it, particularly if you're working in a Microsoft environment. You don't need HTML layout. Text layout is more energy efficient. You only need HTML layout if you're sending images or you're doing actual layout in the email. And that's really questionable unless you're sending out some sort of marketing material, which usually we're not. So reading email, it's estimated, is taking of every 100 hours, 28 hours are spent reading emails. That 35% of emails don't even get read, and that 94% of attachments are unopened. 94%. Waste. How can we change this culture of waste? Somebody needs to start moving on this culture of waste, which is at the heart of digital. So I calculated all these waste areas, the unopened attachments, the unopened emails, etc., the spam. And I estimated that we'd have to plant 32 billion trees every year to deal with all this digital email waste. Just the digital email waste. 32 billion trees we need to plant every single year. And thinking in trees, I said the average tree absorbs about 10 kg of CO2 per year. One tree is, let's imagine, I know it fluctuates enormously, let's imagine an average tree equals 10,000 leaves. So one leaf is equal to 1 gram of CO2. So if you're thinking, if you're sending a HTML email, that's 6 leaves have got to go to work. Whereas if you're sending a text email, that's just 2 leaves have got to go to work. But of course, if you send no email, no leaves have got to go to work to deal with the CO2, to deal with the actual pollution. So how do we change this culture of waste and culture that is driven by digital to really become much more consciousness of the photos that we take, of the emails that we send, and at least as well when we've sent them, or when we've taken the photo and it's not a good photo, we delete it, we get rid of it. So here in the world of, archiving and keeping what to keep and what not to keep in the process. There's an old saying, what do you get when you cross a fox with a chicken? What do you get when you cross a fox with a chicken? You basically get a fox because the fox eats the chicken, right? So let's imagine the chicken as being the useful data, the 5%. Remember that 5% of data that is really useful at a maximum 10% in the process. Well, basically the fox is everything. The fox is, everything together, which means that basically the useless eats the useful because it makes it so much difficult to find it because you can't navigate through it. The search is much less effective. So you want to separate the basically stuff that's useful today from everything else. And some of that everything else you will absolutely delete, and some of it you will archive, but you need to make those decisions. But there needs to be a separation because today in most environments, we store everything in the same place. People store everything on their computer. People store everything in the cloud. People store everything on the internet. We need proper archival strategies, proper ways of dealing with data. Storage pollution. As a basic rule, cloud, yes, can be efficient for processing, etc. But for long-term storage or for basic activities, it is much better to store locally. It's much more energy efficient. I only store 5%, the stuff that is actively needed by clients in the cloud. I keep everything else local in the process on my local drive, right? So basically, local drive unit, let's say if a local drive causes 1 gram of CO2 to store X amount of data, the cloud will cold storage, which is archival type cloud storage, will be 10 times more energy intense, and hot storage will be 3,000 times more energy intense. So basically keeping it on the local hard drive, not sending it, to a cloud in your organization or a cloud owned by Amazon, but keeping it locally, not letting it get out of your computer at all, is the best strategy from a storage point of view. So a deletion path in a model or a psychology of moving stuff out of the hot storage is Dropbox. So that's instant on, instant AppX. Keep very little there if at all possible. And over time have a strategy to move it to more cold storage, such as iDrive or otherwise. And then, as it's getting older, move it to disk offline. If you've got a lot of stuff, move it offline to tapes or disks in the process, and then ultimately move it to the recycle bin. We need strategies and techniques and ways of moving away from storing everything in the process, because this is what is driving the waste. This is what is driving the growth in data centers, is the expectation that we will be storing so much more. So when to delete? Doesn't have an owner, not being properly maintained, takes more effort to maintain than what it's worth, no longer solves a problem, is poor quality, is not being used, particularly for long periods of times, is superseded by something better in the process. So I've been involved in digital and websites and information and all this sort of stuff since the mid-90s. 93, 94, I came across the web for the first time, and I thought it would change the world back then. And the more I looked and researched, I began to learn things that website design and digital design was not about me. One of the first rules was, you are not the user. You got to think beyond the user. And then as I read more and learned more, I understood that you got to think beyond the organization. And I thought it was out here. This was where the answer was. It was out at the user, the customer. So this whole philosophy of customer-centric or user-centric design was basically what I thought, was the ultimate universe in the process. But there's something beyond that. The earth and the universe itself, what I call earth-centered design, that we think of the impact, we think of the impact that these digital devices, the material impact, the energy impact that data has, and we begin to conserve that, and we begin to become really careful, and we think of the impact of all the waste on poisoning the water and the land and the air, and how this e-waste is incredibly growing. It is a nuclear type of waste. It never goes away, and it is building at an extraordinary pace, and we are ignoring it on a global basis. So we got to think about the earth experience, not just the user experience in the actual process. So the earth experience, I think we need a return to wisdom. I think we've got too much intelligence. We've got too many intelligent people in this planet at the moment, and not enough wise people. And we seek out, I know we are being bombarded with fake news, but we got to seek out the truth. The truth is environmentally friendly. Lies tend to be full of big fancy images, and lies tend to come packaged with waste. We seek out the truth. We look at the impact on nature of all this material intensity. It's not about getting rid of our technologies, but moving to a world where our computers last 20 years and our smartphones last 10 years. And we look at the human impact, the impact of the manufacturing in the plants for these devices in China, and for the recycling in the countries like Ghana or Pakistan, etc. We look at the overall impact, and the workers that have to work in the Amazon warehouses, where injuries are 4 or 5 times higher than in other environments. And we're asking, is it worth it? We're thinking, helping people think to the long term and solve long-term needs. And most long-term needs can be solved by human cooperation and collaboration and societal coming together rather than technologies. Increasingly, technologies are focused on superficial wants. So the deep needs, focusing on the long term and the deep needs, and the metrics. What are the metrics? The metrics that are much broader than the narrow, how many visitors did we have coming to the actual website, that the broader outcomes, how are these things impacting the actual environment? How is making these chips impacting the scarcity of water? How do we measure at the earth level the impact on the earth, the outcomes that all these things have, rather than just the activities that occur within these digital environments? And we look at the waste. And how do we minimize waste? How do we get to a point where we have genuine circular economies and we're at close to zero? So maintenance will be key. Maintenance of devices, maintenance of data. As I said, moving stuff, data into the archive, deleting, etc. Reuse where possible. How do we reuse things? We reuse images or structures or stuff that we're doing in digital, and we reuse them again. And less energy. We design with the least energy possible. So our web pages and our tools that, they require the least energy possible for, the people to use them, and the less data possible so we seek to collect as little data as possible, just only the data that we actually need in the process. And if we could do these sorts of things, that would reduce the pressure to have new devices every couple of years, and we could quite possibly build to a situation where we are a lot less material and energy intense on the actual planet. So from a digital cleanup I've been giving you a number of the aspects or components of the actual digital cleanup and specific things that you can actually do in the process, both for the e-waste and both for the data waste, and removing that, reducing that, making sure that it doesn't get actually created in the first place. There's an excellent global organization called Digital Cleanup Day. You see the link here below, and it has lots of resources where guidelines for individuals, for companies, for schools, for municipalities. Every year, next year, I think it's the 18th of March, next year there's going to be a global cleanup day, and it would be wonderful if you could become part of it and could become engines. Libraries are amazing potential centers for basically getting this news out and getting the community educated, and organizing this education which needs to happen, because there was this study done of children. And they asked children to imagine the internet, to imagine technology. And they all drew pictures of clouds and birds for Twitter and stuff like that in the process. Not a single child drew a picture of a computer or a server or a router. We've become so disassociated. We have to reconnect. It's funny, in the digitally connected world, we have totally become disconnected from the physical world. The more connected we become digitally, the more disconnected we become physically. We must reconnect physically, because the digital world is destroying the physical world with the way it's actually going. So Digital Cleanup Day, wonderful initiative. So next one, is actually 19th of March 2022. Tips, loads of stuff on this website, tips on what to do and how to basically go about it, and join a global movement that is seeking to reduce the impact of digital and make it much better and much more productive in the process. So 134 countries were involved last year, deleted 759,000 gigabytes of data, 190 tons of CO2 saved. So that was a tremendous achievement in 2021. So if you'd like to know more about these ideas, you can send me an email, or you can follow me on Twitter. I basically I do a lot of tweets about these sorts of things, a lot of sorts of studies. So it's not anti-technology, it's not anti-data. It's about us basically becoming much more conscious that digital is physical, and that it has a very hidden but very, very serious impact on the climate, and that the changes that we need in order for us to survive as a species will not be found through more technology. They will be found through more human connectivity and more human connection back with nature. So it's not about getting Alexa and telling Alexa to turn the light out. It's much more about us getting up and turning the light out ourselves. It's not about electric vehicles. We will not solve anything long term with millions and millions of electric vehicles. We will solve far more by walking more and by cycling more. So you can be a major force of education, because most people have no clue about this. They're totally astonished when they hear about these stories about the impacts of digital. So there is a massive educational campaign that is needed, and hopefully you can be part of that movement. Thank you very much for listening.